folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we're back for part 2 of the tight end countdown with our friend Alec Poulianis. Alec, how you doing?
Doing well, Ken. Always love talking about tight ends. It's one of my favorite positions to look at.
Interesting group in the bottom. We had some players who might have had a black dot, had good athleticism. Eric All of Iowa, certainly we discussed. Tip Ryman and his Boyle-esque makeup. Very, very large tight end. Had a little bit of difference of opinion on A.J. Barner as well of Michigan, a guy who some people like him, some people love him, but there's a lot to be discussed anyway. Go back and take a download on that first episode if you would. There's a lot interesting to be said. And Alec, we're down to now, I believe, our number 6 on the list. We'll count them down to 6-1. This always goes a little faster because we don't have the intro where the Ravens are, and we don't have to do this first few players, and there tends to be less overlap in these guys. And we've already hit a couple. So
that's right. My number 6 is Eric All, so we already talked to him.
There you go. You're you're in good shape. My number 6 is Ben Sinnott of Kansas State. And let me get down to my notes on him here. Boom, 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 boom. 6'4", 250, 32 3/8 arms, 468 40. The 680 2-3 cone is the lateral movement you really love to see from a tight end. It doesn't happen on every player. By the way, it's becoming less and less common for a tight end to even run a 3 cone at all. And when they do, it's usually because they know they're pretty good at it. And 682 is certainly an outstanding number. Had good receiving statistics in 2023, 9.2 yards per target, 2.02 yards per route run, 6.8 yak per reception is quite good for a tight end. And a 105.3 passer rating throwing to him. That's not that great. His 112.2 passer rating career is better. It may be a function of what was going on at K-State at quarterback, on offensive line, whatever it might have been. So you can always lay the blame on somebody else, and that's often where you would if you're a proponent of the player. If you like Ben, the best number he's got probably is the 14 missed tackles forced on just 48 reception. That's a very highly positive portent for his NFL productivity. It's in line with that 3 cone. It's in line with some of his size characteristics. It's in line with his speed in terms of that. You can talk about missed tackles forced come from a broad spectrum, a smorgasbord of qualities for a player. You can make missed tackles force out of speed. You look at Keaton Mitchell this last year. You can make him out of contact balance. You can make him out of size. You can make him out of elusiveness. Ben Sinnott probably has a little bit of each of those that he gives you relative to the tight end position. So that was good. He's a walk-on. And he ended up playing 3 years at K-State, so pretty impressive from that perspective. I think his production suffered a little bit by being the bailout receiver at K-State. He was only 5 of 14 on contested catches. Now, that's not a big enough sample to say, oh, that's terrible or anything. I'd hope for a tight end, a draftable tight end would be around 50%. And he's at, 5/14 is 36%, right? So that's not that great, but it's also a fairly limited difference in total catches. He is a little bit of a developmental player, but wouldn't surprise me if he has a significant role somewhere by the end of 2024 with the kind of the gifts he brings to the position. I don't think he's a great fit for the Ravens because they have some of the things that he is in terms of wide receivers who like to play flexed and whatnot. If he were to drop to the UDFA ranks, which I don't see happening, then sure they'd be fools not to take a shot on him, and so would 31 other NFL teams. Yeah, so he'll be drafted, but a guy certainly likable and has a good athletic profile.
Yeah, I actually had number 2. I struggled. It was between him and another guy for number 2, and I ended up going with him because I just felt like his feet were incredibly good, really good, sharp cuts in the field. Tacklers just fall off of him, like you mentioned. It's ridiculous. There's no form of contact that he can't get around. Mm-hmm. You think he'd be dead to rights, and then he would keep moving. He lacks long speed, but has very good acceleration and gets with those feet, gets out of the breaks. He looks like a running back. Like I was trying to think of what 250-pound running back moves that well, because he wears number 34 too. So I was just like, he looks like a running back out there. It's just impressive how well he moved after the catch. I thought the walk-on nature might bring him down on some boards. Like, he hasn't been playing the position as long as some of these other players. As far as blocking, he's better as a lead blocker than inline. Can get lungy, and he could use some work there. And like I said, I had number 2. I'm in love with him. And also, like, another thing, I would think his name's pronounced Sinnott, but everything I heard was Sinnott. It's like going to take some wild reprogramming to because it's not spelled that way. So yeah, I really liked him though. He, like I said, number 2. I think, mattering what you're looking for, I think he can be a contributor right away on a team. The guy I have number 3 is more of the higher ceiling guy.
Okay,
but I thought Ben was really refined.
We are down to number 5 then for you, right?
Yeah. So the guy we haven't talked about yet, Cade Stover, 6'4", 247 from Ohio State. Classic basketball player that now plays tight end, also a former defensive end, team captain. I thought he was really good at presenting his hands to the quarterback and making himself a good target, but he didn't run the best routes. Some of his best film was with Stroud, and I hope that the Texans don't draft him because they seem to have a really good connection with one another. Not an inline guy, but on the wing and in 2 tight end sets, I think he could be an asset in the run game. I think this is where, I thought the top 5 for me is a new pantheon of players where they were all clear. I thought they were going to be clear NFL contributors and maybe even starters as you get up, like more starters, obviously. And this is like where there's a lot less projection. I feel like these are the more solid prospects.
Okay, I have Cade Stover at number 4. Okay. Liked him as well. 6'4", 247, 465, 40. I think he's one of the ones who did not run a 3-cone. But if he did, it was not good. I've got it only as brings lateral movement into question, but I didn't put down a 3-cone number for him. So maybe you could look that up for me while I'm going through this here. His decisiveness as a run blocker is something I didn't like. He's playing at Ohio State. So there's a lot of running involved there, not as much as if he were at Michigan, but there's still a lot of running. And he doesn't seem to decide well in level 2 and 3 where he's big enough to block the guys. With a line of scrimmage at his size, I'd expect him to have a little bit of difficulty as an inline tight end. But since he does a lot of his blocking in level 2, I didn't think he did a great job with that. So that's something that probably be improved. He does give you a lot as a receiver. He catches the football. That's his biggest thing. A 75.9% catch rate. Was 80. That's career. Was 80.4% in 2023. 0 drops and only 2 in his career. 2.4%. The guy who came out in the draft, I think it was Hayden Hurst, who came out in the draft with that kind of a profile. And to a degree, Hayden has made that work. Cade Stover, there's going to be a more rational round that he's drafted in. I think, I would say he's probably maybe at the earliest in the very back end of the second round, but probably a 3rd round pick. I have a 4th round value on him for the Ravens because I think he's a player who has to drop into the Ravens value range, which means they probably won't get him. But he is who he is. I know a lot of teams that want tight ends, so that's a guy. 11.3 yards per target. You rarely seen from a tight end a number that high. 2.04 yards per route run. 138.2 passer rating throwing to him. So does a very good job of not letting balls get intercepted that are thrown to him. So that's one of the really nice things. You don't have a passer rating that high without preventing interceptions to a good degree. 16 missed tackles forced on 82 college catches, also good. Again, not an option for the Ravens. The only questions I have are as a blocker and what he does in space doesn't really match up so well with what the Ravens want as a profile. But they'd be really happy with his receiving characteristics. So would I be shocked if they took him in the 3rd round? Yes. Would I be shocked if they took him in the 4th round? It could be a value question that they just don't see how they can pass up on a player that good that late. And we made the point in the first episode that Mark Andrews is really in a crossroads season, and the Ravens are in terms of making a choice between Likely and Andrews. They're both signed through 2025. One of them, but probably not both, will be extended. I don't see any way they try and keep both on the team. So that probably means they try and trade one after the 24 season. Either trade Likely prior to his final year if you can get real value for him, and that would be substantial. Or you trade Andrews prior to his final year. Same question. I mean, you'd really have to get something like a 3 immediately. But the Ravens, in the case of Andrews, have an $11 million cap savings that they could put to good use if they really were convinced Isaiah Likely was ready to go, or if, God forbid, Mark Andrews starts to get on the injury train and miss more games. Now, obviously, what happened against Cincinnati and the hip drop tackle is the kind of thing you hope just doesn't get repeated, but we don't know exactly how that's all going to play out in terms of his injury, and if that's suddenly going to be something where we're going to miss more games from Mark Andrews. So if they went and they got out of Cade Stover and there are a couple guys above him who fall into the same class, it would be a fairly clear indication that they're moving on from either Likely or Andrews for 2025, or they're moving on from Kolar really in 2024. That they're okay doing that, and that could be a possibility as well. I don't think Charlie Kolar's played himself off the team, but he certainly didn't develop as a run blocker the way the Ravens would have hoped. And if you're going to bring in a guy like Stover, he's going to be your third tight end in 2024 at least. And so that means you have to dump somebody, and the only guy that makes sense is Charlie Kolar. So if I think it highly unlikely the Ravens draft a tight end anywhere in the early or even mid rounds, but if they were to see tremendous value still on the board, then they might. Cade Stover as a 4th round pick would not be completely outrageous.
Agreed. Yeah, I think in the first 2 days you don't touch a guy like Cade. From a Ravens perspective, will be other players, other higher positions of need / positional value. And another thing I would point out about Cade Stover that was impressive. I was trying. One thing that's like really tough is yards per target for college players. I find a little trickier just because of the level of competition varies so much.
Yep.
But his actually went up. So his went up in his last year, which it wouldn't be surprising for most players, but because CJ Stroud was his quarterback before, I thought that maybe it would, have suffered. But no, it actually improved. And like you mentioned, really phenomenal yards per target. So that was another really good indicator for Stover's success going to the next level.
And Mark Andrews, in his rookie season, still holds the Ravens record for yards per target at 11.04. And so that 11.3 number is darn good. And there are a bunch of college receivers, by the way, who are up there 12, 13, 14 yards per target. I think Jamar Chase might have been close to 15 yards per target in his final season. So, yeah, I mean, all the top guys all had outrageous yards per target numbers this season as well. But I was just looking up that yards per target number. Yeah, he was under 10 yards per target in his first 2 years. He's also a younger player. He should be. He's actually, I'm looking at it, he's almost 24. He'll be 24 in June. He's only played 3 years at Ohio State, but it'll be 24 in June. Huh. Well, that might make me rethink that opinion. but still, that is a big negative, by the way. Taking 24-year-old players is just one of my big bugaboos. Yeah.
Right. And that's the hard things about the draft, Ken. I did look up for you the 3-cone. No one really ran it, There's only like 7 tight ends that are brave enough to run it. So it's always hard to have all the information, right? Like age is hard to find, work, like obviously look, the work ethic and what's between the ears is always hard to evaluate when you're watching the film. And I feel like that's one of the biggest discrepancies that we'll find on draft day. I'll never forget, us sitting around during the third day clamoring, why aren't these guys being drafted by the Ravens? What are they doing? And no one drafts them, and then it's like, okay, something's going on with that player, right? So it's an imprecise science even for the best evaluators, and it's always hard to find all the information.
All right, so he was my number 4 guy, but I don't think we've done my number 5 guy yet, right?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so that's Jaheim Bell of Florida State, who's probably got to be on your list because you haven't talked about him yet. I don't think we've talked about him at all so far.
He's actually he got outed, man. I told you he's a wide receiver, so
Oh, okay, fair enough.
No, he's a great player though. I'd love to talk about him.
Okay, so 6'2", 241, 33-inch hands and 33-inch arms and 10-inch hands, 461, explosive jumps, great athlete across the board. Mm-hmm. He's smallish and fast, but I mean, he's bigger than Derek Boston was, so he's not a guy who I would put in the wide receiver category. He did play half his snaps wide in 2023. That's a guy who's really more of a big slot receiver, but it's half his snaps, played half in line as well. Focal point of the Florida State offense in the second half. He really took over with many more targets. I don't know if they had a key injury, by the way, there, but they might have. Voss is a Florida State fan, so maybe I'll have to ask him about that. 9.7 yards per target, 1.97 yards per route run, 117 passer rating throwing the ball to him, 12 missed tackles forced, and that speed make a very nice yak threat. And he's one of the best of all the tight ends at 8.1 yak per reception. There might have been one guy with more. Yeah, Brock Bowers had more, but Jaheim Bell was very special in that category. 9.2 yak per reception career. That's impressive.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing I look for. When I see a really high yak number like that, one of the things I look for is, did he have a lot of red yards regained on screen passes? And it's not a whole lot of screen passes. PFF did a good job this year of putting the screen passes, the route tree in the book. And for tight ends, it's not really very good because they don't even have a high percentage of the routes captured. I think a lot of that has to do with chip blocking at the line of scrimmage, and maybe they don't then put it in their route tree, or it might have to do with other route or receptions that are made after on an extended play where there had to be a change of direction or some other reaction to the quarterback made. But anyway, a lot of receptions are not slotted into one of the categories that PFF has. Nonetheless, I found the information extremely useful for things just like this, where there were not a lot of screen passes to him that drove red yards regained. And what do I mean by that? Well, Ray Rice in one of his seasons had a negative ADOT, and what that meant is he had more yak than he had receiving yards. Think about that. He was like 735 to 731 or something like that. So it was a relatively small difference. But basically, he was catching the ball on average behind the line of scrimmage. And so a lot of his receiving yards were making up the yards back to.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about the Eufy Video Lock. Because when I'm not podcasting, my day job is a smart home specialist. And the Eufy Video Smart Lock is perfect. This is what you guys need to go get. It replaces the deadbolt on your door. So now you can come home without fumbling with keys. You can just type in a code. Or, even better, use your fingerprint to unlock after 1 second. You put your finger there, pops out, my door's open. It's perfect. It also is an integrated video doorbell. We've all seen the video doorbells. We all know the ones that are out there. I've seen many of them get stolen. No one's going to steal this because it's your door lock. It's impossible for them to steal. There's no monthly fee. Other ones do. But this one, it'll record locally, so you never have to pay if you don't want to. The battery, it lasts up to 4 months. Plus, it notifies you ahead of time. And I mentioned earlier 1 second fingerprint recognition. No, I meant 1 second till it opens. The AI self-learning chip will learn your fingerprint even faster, and then it opens up. Completely keyless entry. No more keys. And I know I set this up as I'm a smart home specialist, but anyone can install this. All you need is a Phillips screwdriver. That's it. And then you're done. Guys, I love this product. Make sure you check it out. Now, here's the easiest thing to do. Just go on to Google or whatever you prefer and search Eufy Video Lock. That's EUFY Video Lock. Or visit eufyofficial.com/video lock to see how you can gain complete control of your door, just like me, just like Ken.
The line of scrimmage. Okay, so anyway, that's in a short way I could put that. That's not the case with Jaheim Bell. There were some screens, but there was only 4 in 2023 in that group. when he had 8.1 yak per reception. And you can get a lot of cheap yak on screen passes. So he didn't have a 50. I didn't know of one anyway. I don't know of a 50-yard screen pass that he took to the house, but he only had 4 screens caught in 23 in total. So a lot of things he can do. You can move him around at the NFL level. I think you can play him in the backfield. I think you can play him on the move. Real question is whether you want him on combination blocks in the middle, if you want him motioning into the middle. I mean, that's really a Patrick Ricard or Nick Boyle job. I don't think Jaheim Bell is the guy you would want on that situation. He's a little bit smallish for that, but he can do a lot for you at the NFL level from a versatility standpoint. So anyway, he was my number 5 guy.
That's fair. I think if I were to have put him in consideration for tight end, he'd be up there as well, number 5. I just look at when I was watching him on film, I was just like, okay, this guy, and then I saw this line and it just cracked me up. Let's be real, he's a running back that outgrew his position, had to find some other way to play on the field, and I was like, that sounds about right. So he's absolute playmaker and a Swiss Army knife, but he was just like always running routes and occasionally blocking. I just didn't know. I guess what I was saying is he just more of a really good big slot that could, block up above average, potentially, but like, I just didn't really project him in line. And I try not to be too sizes, but he just looks small, at 6'2". And I couldn't see it. I just couldn't see it. And it's like one of those players I feel like at the college level, you get away with playing him a little bit out of position, so to speak, from like a professional level. But I just didn't know if he would project. So that's why I took him off my tight end list. But I think he's a great player and we'll get drafted. And who knows, he's a guy that's way too good to be called a fullback, but he could play as a fullback, right? I think you could line him up all over the place. So very exciting prospect. Just didn't know where to put him as far as like in what list, so to speak. But yeah, an absolute great player and makes sense on your board where he is as a tight end. Yeah.
One of the issues I have with players is, and this was true of a couple of the edge rushers too, who I bumped inside, is they're much better in terms of their category of player if they get bumped inside. There's only one guy who was in the 5-tech mold, I'd say, but played a lot of edge in college, who I really left on the outside. The other guys, I bumped them over to the defensive interior because there's so many good edges, and the defensive interior has, again, I wouldn't say a complete dearth of talent, but there's a lack of real high end talent. The problem is you don't really want to be a 5-tech because you don't have an NFL position, because so many teams, 5-tech is a base defense position. You really have to be a 5 and a 3-tech in order to get on the field a lot. And that's been a problem for some players in recent years. But there's some 5-tech slash edges who could play uncovered end. And, we've seen Matabike play some end if some teams are short on real outside linebacker talent, and they might want to play more uncovered end and have a 5-tech play effectively an edge position. But I don't want to go too deep into that without just saying that I tried to put players at the position where I thought they'd be the highest on the list. And for sure, Jaheim Bell is the highest on the list at tight end. He's lost in a huge set of wide receivers. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely is. But then that kind of, plays a little bit into the conversation brought up in the first show briefly about a guy like Bowers, where, okay, what level wide receiver would he be? Is he your 4th best wide receiver, 5th, as like a pass catcher, right? When you're trying to project where he's going to get drafted, because, like I said, like there's so many good players at those cornerstone positions that I anticipate going first.
It's an interesting position to try and rank and whatnot, because the tight end is a fit position for a lot of teams. They have their way they want to play football,
right? And
their tight end has to fit that. And a lot of times their tight end has to fit in with their other with the rest of their receiving core without really consideration for their own receiving needs, or desires. Yeah. So, it's somebody's got to be the glue that holds the whole thing together. In a lot of cases, that's a tight end, and he's also got to help make your running game.
And I think, kind of talking about Bell, this is a player that will take some courage, right? Like whoever drafts him has to have a plan for him. maybe you line him as a wide receiver, but maybe he's a less effective wide receiver, right? Like I feel like you have to be kind of creative with where you line him up. So it's a guy that needs a plan, so to speak. Yeah.
All right. Well, fair enough. And I don't question your judgment at all to drop him off the list. So he was my number 5 guy. We go to your number 4 guy. Do we already have your number 4 guy?
Let's see. Yes, Tip. So
okay. And I had Cade Stover at number 4. Number 3 guy now is up for you then.
Okay. Jatavian Sanders, 6'4", 245 out of Texas. Amazing ceiling player. Just so fluid and athletic. Very clear path to being a top tight end if everything works out for him. Just his ability after the catch is exceptional. I thought he was good at adjusting his frame downfield. And again, one thing I always look for, and maybe that's just a bias as a person who's watched the Ravens and their tight ends over all these years, it's just like how well or how good do they present themselves to the to the quarterback, and how like quarterback friendly are they? Sanders definitely has that in spades. He's a top player, day 2 pick for sure. I feel like, and not a first round guy, but could certainly be a second round and maybe a third round value for me.
Third round value for the Ravens.
Maybe not third round value to the Ravens, but third round value to the rest of the league. I don't know. I guess he is. There's going to be a lot of guys who are third round values for the Ravens when they pick in the third round. And I hope it's not tight end.
Right. Well, there you go. I would basically with it. After Bowers, he's the second best pure receiver in this draft, even though, I have certainly some good things to say about Bell and whatnot. Here's what I liked about his yak situation. You talked about this. He's got 7.7 yaks per reception, which is almost at the top of the class anyway, but he did it with only 4 missed tackles forced on 45 receptions. He's just doing a lot of it with speed, running away, running the seam, as opposed to breaking tackles and making big plays after that. Now, there's going to be less of that at the NFL level. And it's also an opportunity also for him to maintain or even improve on that missed tackle forced rate at the NFL level. So I think it's actually his yak per reception is probably duplicatable when he gets to that level. So that's a positive thing. He had only 4 drops in his whole college career, 3.9% drop rate. That's excellent, of course. Didn't do his jumps, so there may be some explosiveness concerns and attacking the football. I don't really have anything to say specifically negative about that. His overall receiving stats are very good, including 10.2 yards per target. But the fact that he didn't do jumps probably means he knew he was not going to do well on jumps. So just take that for what it is. And that's despite, a 4.69 40. So he's got some juice in those legs, to be sure. The big knock on him is really not a particularly good blocker. I don't know whether I'm willing to give him the same bashing that I have seen other people do. Is that basically he's a low effort blocker. It looks like to me he's not engaged as much as he should be, but there's players who just don't use their arms that much. And Faalele is the big one for the Ravens, who does not use his arms well at all to strike and whatnot. Sanders is a guy who's got the length to deal with level 2 and level 3 players easily, and he's not quite 33 inches in terms of arm length, but that's long enough to deal with corners, safeties, most linebackers, and hold them off at a distance. Is it a question of athleticism? Is it a question of decision making? Is it a question of effort? I'm not really sure. I would probably rule out athleticism, but I'm not sure I'm willing to really tag him with the effort. If the Ravens thought it was an effort situation, they probably just wouldn't draft him. I mean, honestly, that may be a guy who's protecting his draft status, is making career decisions all the way through his time at Texas, which, by the way, I wouldn't imagine he'd get away with there either, if that were the case. If they do take him, and it would probably have to be no later than round 3 as value, then it would be a clear sign to me that they'd want to move on from Andrews or move on from Likely. And they know they're at the end, probably move on from Andrews. And as we mentioned earlier, it also means Charlie Kolar is not a member of the 2024 Ravens, because you can't keep I don't think you can keep 4 tight ends plus Ricard. I think you can keep 3 plus Ricard, but I don't think you can keep 4. So anyway, I'm not sure. His position is not safe. Charlie Kolar is one of the Ravens who will watch the draft with a nervous energy, or should probably just do something else on those days, because he can only get bad news.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Anyone they put draft capital into almost surely would take his job. So that's why we're talking about UDFAs is the most likely, because I guess, I think they're invested enough in Kolar and like enough about what they're seeing out of Kolar that they aren't going to actively try and replace him on this year's roster. It's not like, Simpson, where you could comfortably draft him, be a backup, and have him around and not use him at all and let Queen play out his last year. It's not that situation with tight end. You're on mute, Ken.
So I had Jatavian Sanders as my number 2 guy. And I think my number 3 we already did. Yes, right. We did. And that was Theo Johnson.
Yep.
Okay. So we're down to your number 2 guy now. And who is that?
That was Ben Sinnott. So we already talked about him. Yep.
Okay. Very good. So we're down to number 1. Haven't taken a long time to get to the end of the road on this show, which is good. But tell me what you think about Brock Bowers.
I mean, he's the guy that you're looking for at a tight end. Just a mismatch making monster. Creates separation against any kind of player because of his size and speed. I think if you're trying to find a bad thing about him, is that he'll clap attack high pointed balls. But otherwise, he was played all over the field at Georgia, H-back, in the shotgun, fullback. And, he also isn't the biggest guy at 6'3". Mm-hmm. But he puts so much good on tape. He's a day one guy, a true first round grade, in my opinion. And a player I'm excited to see in the NFL, as long as he's not in the AFC North, I guess.
Yeah, let's hope not.
Because everyone mocks him to the Bengals, and I said, please not, please not.
Yeah, that would be. The Bengals might get somebody good where they're drafting 18, right, for the Bengals.
18, yeah,
yeah. So at whoever they get, we're probably not going to like it. At that place, correct. 52.2% of flex snaps in college. So, they've everywhere he's played, they want to get him the ball in space, and that makes a lot of sense. 23 out of 39 contested catches. He only pass blocked on 8% of plays. When he did that, he graded well. Now, I didn't watch enough to see exactly whether he was blocking at a high level or not, but I wouldn't be able to tell from 10 snaps, and I'd need several games to get to that. Anyway, I trust that PFF's got it right there. 3 drops, 5.1%, a career rate of only 4.4%, which is fantastic. 18 missed tackles forced just this last season, which helped him get to 8.7 yak per reception. It's literally no area this guy is not very special in. Career passer rating throwing to him, 148.9. Wow. 158.3 is perfect, folks. And that's not the college scale. It is his college touchdowns, interceptions, 20 and 2. Okay, so whatever he's doing in terms of high pointing a ball and potentially tipping it or just missing it because he's going like clapboards on it. I assume that's what you meant by that. It's not resulting in interceptions, so that's good.
Yeah.
And anything I want to say other than that, he didn't do the Georgia Pro Day due to a hamstring injury. So I've got this funny 448 other number on his 40. I'm not sure where it came from. Not sure I completely trust it, and I know I don't care at this point, given all the other positive. And the fact, part of it is just honestly the Ravens won't come anywhere near him. So he won't be a pick by the Ravens. And like you, I probably hope he goes to an NFC team.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Ken, the 40. I heard someone else say, I can't take credit for it, but I 100% am in the same camp. It's the cleavage of the NFL scouting media. It's just, it doesn't actually matter, right? It's not substantial. You can get some idea of the player through that score, obviously, of course, but just watch him in pads. Just watch him in pads.
Yeah, well, we talked about that a fair amount on the wide receiver show, and James Ogden and I were talking about Xavier Worthy, who had the record think. And somebody is going to take him. Some measurables only team is going to take him. It used to be the Raiders would get that guy. And they got Darius Hayward-Bay at number 7 overall there. Darius Hayward-Bay became, as Alex Kazar would say, a really good special teams player. His career. He's a guy they want around. Oh boy, that's the guy you want in the special teams room, which is not the guy you want at number 7. John Ross went to the Bengals at number, I don't know what it was, but it was pretty high. Might have been the top 10, might have been number 9 when they got him.
Yeah,
but anyway,
it was number 9, and they drafted him instead of Mahomes. So
instead of Mahomes, yeah, good pick.
A lot of players. I mean, not a lot, I guess. Only 10 other players can say that, but a lot of teams would be saying that same thing who had the opportunity to draft that high. Yeah. All
right. Well, great stuff. I really appreciated going through this group of players with you. It's an interesting tight end class. It's not one absolutely dotted with talent, but there's some gradation in here, and there's some players who can help you win football games, certainly. Alec, tell folks where they can listen to your podcast and talk football with you online.
Sure. You can find the podcast at One Winning Pod, onewinningpod.com. And you can find us on Twitter, the same handle. And my personal handle is at @Polianis. And always enjoy talking football with people. It's one of the things I definitely miss during these few months where we don't have, something to talk about, right? Other than the draft. So it's definitely a great escape, right? Talk about football and watch it and engage with all the friends I've made in the process, like you can. So
yeah, there you go.
A lot of fun.
Appreciate it, Alec. Always a pleasure. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on the show as well, if you want to talk draft, hit me up very quickly. If you want to talk anything related to draft metrics or draft performance in particular, those are best done before the draft, but they can also be done after. Schedule is getting very tight now, pre-draft, so hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. If you want to do one of the recollection series, hit me up for that. Again, DMs always open. Any player you'd like to talk about that's not at the top of the pantheon of stars, any time in Ravens history. And so a lot of players are still open, but particularly those who played before 2000, of great interest to get more of them lined up. Alec, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks so much, Ken.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.